Sustainability, sustainable development. Feels like we are hearing these words and phrases a lot more often these days. From its origins of being the exclusive preserve of fringe activists and policy wonks, this phraseology is now used by everyone from environmentalists to politicians, to global financiers, to real estate interests. From protest to political alternatives, to sales pitches.
We can all do our part to keep plastic out of the ocean.
Indeed, it has become a very catchy and often appropriated buzzword, to the point where its meaning has become somewhat diminished in terms of a legitimate development policy translatable to the general public. With this pilot episode, I will give a first attempt to go over some of the basic principles and introductory concepts relating to sustainable development and bring into focus some questions on the matter as it relates to the Cayman context. So, just how do we go about defining sustainable development? Well, at a basic level, we can refer to the definition in the book Our Common Future, published by the World Commission on Environment and Development in 1987, in which it is defined as development that meets the need of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is known as the Brundtland definition. At its core is an approach to development that looks to balance our current economic ambitions with an awareness of the environmental, social, and economic potentials and limitations we face as a society. To build on this, we can look to what are commonly known as the 3 pillars of sustainable development, sometimes referred to as the 3 E's: economy, environment, and equity in the form of social community. Here I have laid out 2 formats or ways of understanding how the pillars interact: a Venn diagram and Amplify's preferred nested interdependence model. As we can garner from these helpful visualizations, for development to truly be sustainable, the development in question must adequately satisfy the requirements of all 3 of these mentioned aspects. As we have frequently seen, all too often our development is driven by one particular need or ambition, without a full consideration of wider and longer term impacts, or consideration of the other relevant pillars. Origins. The concept of sustainable development as understood in the Western context has its origins in the ether of the 1960s and 70s environmental movements, being explored at a policy level more fully in the 1972 UN Conference on the Human Environment in Stockholm, which led to the establishment of ministries of environment around the world and led to the 1987 Brundtland Report, which coined and defined the term. Later came the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development in 1992, in which the global community came together to further define humanity's relation to our Earth and our development of it. In this conference's declaration, some key principles were outlined. Principle 1. Human beings are at the center of concerns for sustainable development. They are entitled to a healthy and productive life in harmony with nature. Principle 4. In order to achieve sustainable development, environmental protection shall constitute an integral part of the development process chain and cannot be considered in isolation from it. And Principle 5. All states and all people shall cooperate in the essential task of eradicating poverty as an indispensable requirement for sustainable development, in order to decrease the disparities in standards of living and better meet the needs of the majority of the people of the world. Leave a comment if you can tell me which of these principles are relevant to which pillars of sustainable development. In future videos, I will go into further detail on the history of the evolution of sustainable development policy and explore some of the legal concepts being developed around the world in relation to environmental protection and sustainable development. Suffice to say for now, in relation to the Caymanian context, such an area is still in a somewhat nascent stage of development, though we do have some forward-thinking land and marine park protections, with the latter in particular being a leader in the region. Is it all just about the environment? Balancing and living within our environmental means and limits is without a doubt one of the central pillars of sustainable development principles. An obvious implication on the world scale of not doing so is the threat posed by climatic change, the real-world effects of which are being seen in increases in prices on certain produce due to constrained supply from environmental factors. In fact, many of the world's current refugee crises are currently being exacerbated by climate-induced poor crop yields in developing countries most vulnerable to climatic changes, further fueling conflict and human suffering. At the time of this video's release, the UN has declared the world's first climate change-related famine in Madagascar, which had also been hit by large and unseasonal storms the previous year. Pakistan was also devastated by massive flooding in 2022 due to unseasonal rains and melting of Himalayan glaciers. We have also borne witness to wildfires increasing in intensity and frequency across every human-inhabited continent on the globe. Many developing countries such as those in sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, Bangladesh, Latin America, or small Pacific island nations like Kiribati, just to name a few, have not traditionally been net contributors to this global problem, while developed countries such as the USA and those in the global north are consuming disproportionate amounts of the world's resources while producing disproportionate emissions. For the Caymanian context, we only need to look at areas such as the south end of 7 Mile Beach and consider the factors, such as poor planning and foresight in allowing construction within the dynamic and shifting sand and wave ranges, despite warnings. Under the water, increasing pressures on the sand producers, such as reduced numbers of parrotfish that process and create fine sand themselves, as well as the coral bleaching, ocean acidification, disease, and careless human error or design in the form of cruise ship anchor dropping, is severely reducing the amount of living corals available to be converted into sand. These are just some of the factors that have led to environmental degradation in the form of beach erosion. If such patterns are left unchecked and the beach continues to erode, there will be very obvious negative effects on Caymanian tourism, business, and fish stocks. So no, it's not just all about the environment itself per se, as there are very, very real socioeconomic implications and externalities that flow from our maltreatment of it. So how does this affect me? Well, the impacts of our decisions as a society affects everyone. And our developmental approach has very real and meaningful consequences for people's lives. For example, poor planning of communities can have the effect of the reduction of quality of life for the people that live in them. Relying solely on food importation leaves a country like ours at risk of disruptions in supply chains and vulnerable to global economic price fluctuations, economic crashes, or issues in our importation infrastructure. Sustainable development policy provides an approach to making better and more responsible decisions on the issues that affect all of our lives, not only in the here and now, but the lives of future generations as well. By incorporating human-friendly development plans and people-centric urban designs, we can ensure healthier, more sociable, and tighter-knit communities. We can ensure that residents have access to employment, amenities, healthcare, and leisure facilities, as well as access to natural spaces necessary for human healing. So how do we make it happen? We all have our part to play, from the grassroots to the top of the pyramid. Whether it's you and your neighbors planting and maintaining community food gardens, or a developer ensuring their projects don't erode the beach, or the government introducing responsible consumption and recycling policy, or renewable energy for its people. Big or small, every act counts. Encouraging our elected officials and decision-making bodies to incorporate sustainable development principles into the evolution of our community is necessary in order for us to create an equitable country in the 21st century. It is important for us to first educate ourselves with these ideas and principles. As a community, we will need to sound out these ideas together, collaboratively, and demand that such policy be taken into account and applied by our elected and appointed officials, public authorities, regulatory and decision-making bodies. As a channel that will be looking to encourage the dissemination of this information, we will be playing our part in educating our society and encouraging decision makers to take such measures into serious consideration. So, that's all well and good, Rory, you say, but what does any of this mean? Are there any codified set of aims and ambitions that we can utilize for reference, guidance, or applicability? Well, yes. More recently, in 2015, the UN adopted an integrated set of aims known as the Sustainable Development Goals as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that by 2030, all people enjoy peace and prosperity. These 17 SDGs are integrated. They recognize that action in one area will affect outcomes in others, and that development must balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability. These are broad brushstrokes designed to influence policymaking on a holistic level and include things like striving to zero poverty, to zero hunger, for citizens to all have access to good health and well-being, quality education, affordable and clean energy, sustainable cities and communities, and responsible consumption and production practices. In relation to our Caymanian context, there is also a wealth of resources available describing policy prerogatives for the small island developing states. I will be creating a video on that and the concepts of the green and blue economy in the coming weeks. If sustainable development is about the future, does that mean we have to lose out now? And my answer is no, not necessarily. Sustainable development is about finding better ways of doing things, both for our future and for our present. Changes in our methods of work, transport, consumption, and lifestyle can be positive for us in the present and don't need to mean that our quality of life will be reduced. In fact, in further videos, I hope to explore in detail with you all how our present lives can be improved with sustainable development policy. By ensuring a strong, healthy, and just society, our daily quality of life can tangibly improve. This means meeting the diverse needs of all people in our existing and future communities, the promotion of personal and societal well-being, social inclusion and cohesion, and creating equitable opportunities for all Caymanian and community stakeholders. Thank you very much.